Hello, and welcome to the 8th episode of TB76's TSW Thoughts, where I review TSW products and review them from my own brutally honest perspective. I am an independent reviewer, so I am not affiliated or endorsed by Dovetail Games. Today, we will be looking at the Frankenbahn Stuttgart Heilbronn route, which seems to me like DTG tried to do a mix of the Linke Rheinstrecke and Bremen Oldenburg with vintage rolling stock, a linear route by the river, and so on and so forth. It is supposedly set in 2000, but has a lot of authenticity issues which I will address, and also will showcase reskins I did for the route to make it more authentic. So, without further ado, let's get into the overview. The Stuttgart Heilbronn route runs for 51 kilometers in the German state of Baden Württemberg, between Stuttgart, the state capital or Landhauptstadt of the state of Baden Württemberg, which is also in the historic region of Swabia, Schwaben, and Heilbronn in the historic region of Franconia, Franken, hence the DLC name Frankenbahn. Incidentally, it is not the only TSW route set in Franconia, but however, the only one to be set in the Baden-Württemberg portion of Franconia. The other routes are Main-Spessartbahn, Main-Talbahn, and Kassel-Würzburg, but are in the Bavarian portion of Franconia. The route runs from Besichheim onwards along the course of the river Neckar, although unlike the Linke Rheinstrecke, which follows the course of the Rhine throughout, and is often more covered by trees and foliage than the Linke Rheinstrecke, they are similar in nature in their riverside sections, with vineyards and wine terraces scattered by the line side in places. Of note, the Rhine and Neckar, as well as the Main, Inn, and Lech, are the only rivers in the German language to have the masculine grammatical gender, while all other rivers, the Elbe, Donau, Danube, Spree, Isar, Ruhr, Lahn, Saale, Weser, etc. have the feminine grammatical gender, hence am Main, am Rhein, am Neckar, or an der Donau, an der Spree, an der Elbe, using the dative case. The route is set in the year 2000, 3 years after the setting of the Linke Rheinstrecke and 8 to 9 years before the setting of Bremen-Oldenburg. Indeed, the route is portrayed before the 2006 rebuilding of some of the infrastructure. I can't remember offhand what it was, so please let me know in the comments. However, a lot more modern features such as the PIS and information displays, which are more modern and not accurate to the route's time period, are included. But one saving grace is that the bloody Dostos are not included in the route package, but they however layer from the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn. However, these should really represent the earlier 4th gen Dostos, the DAB PBZ FA 764 or 763 with the analog gauges in the cab as opposed to the digital display of the DB PBZ FA 766 or 767, although they are externally almost the same. The rolling stock included in this route is a mix of new and reused stock. The new stock is the BR140 and the Wittenberger Kopf Cab Car, the second cab car variation of the N-Wagen Coaches, which are also included. The reused stock as part as well the aforementioned N-Wagen Coaches are the Verkehrsrot Kopf, which first appeared in Bremen-Oldenburg, the BR636 in old Bunte-Bahn livery, again, and the BR111 that first appeared in the Salzburg-Rosenheim route, but the variation with a single-arm pantograph as opposed to the diamond pantograph as seen on the Salzburg-Rosenheim and Mittenwaldbahn variants. The BR140 is a variation of the Deutsche Bundesbahn post-war Einheits-E-Loks, a standard design from the 1950s, originally named the E40, and is one of these two post-war Einheits-E-Loks in game, the other being the BR110, originally E10 from Bremen Oldenburg and Linke Rheinstrecke, albeit with the Bügelfalter front end, which in German means iron crease. The Bügelfalter front end is included in examples of the BR110 built from 1963 onwards. We shall now compare the two similar locomotives. For one, the maximum speed of the 140 is 110 km an hour, and the 110 is 140 km an hour. The 140 is therefore used more as a freight locomotive, while the 110 is used more as a passenger locomotive. Now to the cabs, where the 140 is depicted in its original state with the original gauges and PZB lights, while the 110 is depicted with LZB equipment, which was fitted in the 90s to some members of the class, although a lot weren't fitted, and I'll address that in the Bremen to Oldenburg review. The roof equipment of the 140 and the 110 are visually different, with the 140 not having dynamic brakes, and therefore it doesn't have the dynamic brake vents that are seen on the 110. And finally, here is a comparison of the whistle sound of the two locomotives. The Wittenberger Kopf is different to the Karlsruher Kopf, in it being more modern and built in the 90s with upgraded equipment and a different front end to the Karlsruher Kopf from the 70s. Here is a quick comparison of the cabs and the interiors, but they otherwise use the same N-Wagen foundation. The stock, however, in their default states are in the standard DB Verkehrsrot, which is not fully accurate to the 2000 time period, as a lot of the rolling stock were in the previous colour schemes of the former Bundesbahn and Reichsbahn. This time was known as the Bunte-Bahn, as Verkehrsrot was gradually rolled out. For this reason, I did a series of reskins, 8 for the 111 and 3 for the 140, in colour schemes more appropriate to 2000. Even an ex-S-Bahn Rhein-Ruhr BR111, and links for these reskins will be in the description. These skins are best used in tandem with reskins from the Creators Club, as I am showing in this review. Under Stuttgart Hauptbahnhof, the S-Bahn station Stuttgart Hauptbahnhof Tief, the underground platforms, where S-Bahn services run on the Stuttgart S-Bahn to places like... is that meant to be a feminine dative or genitive? Because Stadt is feminine. What's this? And Weil. Surely they should know how the genders, subordinates and cases work, and I'm saying that as a non-native German speaker / learner. Anyway, S-Bahn services, pending the release of the BR420, are run by the Frankfurt S-Bahn BR423s, which are time and region inaccurate for many reasons. As far as I know, there wasn't Wi-Fi on trains in 2000s. Smartphones wouldn't come for another 7 years. S-Bahn services are drivable as far as Bietigheim-Bissingen, the northern terminus of the Stuttgart S-Bahn network. And I think this BR425 is lost, and in the wrong time period too. Why does it layer from the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn, not Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr? The freight yard at Kornwestheim is also included, which is where freight services start and terminate on the route, as well as for shunting trips with the 363. But then again, you can also use the BR294 now as well. also seen is the container loader on the other side of the yard, which loading containers might be a good concept for TSW if DTG or another third-party developer can find a way to get the mechanism to work. Freight services on the route typically are drivable as far as Bietigheim-Bissingen, but some are drivable as far as Heilbronn. Passenger services, excluding the S-Bahn services, are typically either RE or SC, a faster or stopping service. However, these trains typically do not stop at the stations between Stuttgart and Bietigheim-Bissingen, with the exception of Ludwigsburg, which is a more major station on the route. One exception is this RB service run by a 628 from Stuttgart-Feuerbach to Heimerdingen or Weissach, but these run at rush hour only and have since been withdrawn. These are only drivable to Stuttgart-Zuffenhausen. For intercity services, they are usually AI only, running to destinations off the map, and you are mostly changing engines at Stuttgart with the BR101. There are 2 services a day drivable between Heilbronn and Stuttgart in both directions using the BR218. This reskin is by Hochschule as part of their 218 livery and sound pack. In the future, DTG will be releasing a BR147 DLC, which is the passenger version of the TRAXX 3, and is already in TSW with the BR187 by Skyhook Games, which is really a rough piece of work, to put it politely, with the light clusters being wrong, the sounds not being great, but hopefully this DTG version will be better. This will include a new timetable set in the future, around 2016 if I remember rightly, which is a bit odd, considering the infrastructure, but the PIS displays will be more fitting, and the station size will be more dated. I don't know. I might compare both Skyhook's 187 and DTG's 147 when it is released. So, that was an overview. Now on to what I like, dislike, and what can be improved. What I like. The vintage rolling stock. It provides a refreshing change to the modern day almost uniform rail scene of Dostos, EMUs, and dare I say, TRAXX freight trains. Looking at you, BR185.2, this provides a much more hands-on driving experience than the single control lever of many EMUs and locomotives with the AFB. Older German stock does not tend to have these luxuries, so you need to be more hands-on with your driving. Be careful, or you could overspeed. The vintage rolling stock can also in their reskin states work well on the 1997 timetable of the Linke Rheinstrecke, and indeed there are mods on TrainSim community that do indeed layer the BR140 and the Wittenberger Kopf into the timetable, as demonstrated here, and I have Hochschule's version installed. Link in the description. The 2 contrasting sections of the route. The busiest section from Stuttgart to Bietigheim-Bissingen with multiple tracks and S-Bahn stations, which permit speeds as high as 140 km an hour, and then further north, the quieter section, which is more winding and slower in nature. The signal box at Kirchheim is of an interesting design, being placed up on a steel frame, and this either wood or steel construction. I like the way it looks, and having done a Google search and on Google Maps, it is still in situ as of 2026 and has been renovated externally. The stations are well modelled, especially in my opinion Stuttgart Hauptbahnhof, Ludwigsburg, Stuttgart Zuffenhausen and Stuttgart Hauptbahnhof Tief, the S-Bahn platforms. The ticket machines of the era, as seen here, are quite interesting, like this example seen here. I've noticed that they come in 2 colours. A blue colour for most of the stations and a more orange colour for the S-Bahn stations, as orange was used for S-Bahn networks during the Bunte-Bahn era. What I dislike. These modern cars on reused car transporter wagons. which look totally out of place for the year 2000 and are unsurprisingly reused from more 2010 onwards routes, but just about scrape it for Bremen Oldenburg, but not here. A major gripe of many players, including myself, is the lack of the Stuttgart S-Bahn tunnel or the Verbindungsbahn. It only ends at Stuttgart Hauptbahnhof, and should at the very least have been included as far as Schwabstrasse. Indeed, the S-Bahn services S4, S5, S6 and S60 terminate at Schwabstrasse, and if it was included, you would be able to drive the full-length S5 route from Schwabstrasse to Bietigheim-Bissingen, which makes the tunnel's omission more annoying. These wine ledges near Bietigheim are missing their ends, and they look rather rough on the edges and incomplete. And also, what the fuck is with that lamppost? Various time period inaccuracies, which I have described in the review, not just the PIS and Verkehrsrot as default. I've gone through a lot of them in the overview and other places, so I won't repeat myself here. The Wittenberger Kopf's default horn is just reused from the Karlsruher Kopf, which is inaccurate. DTG did not record a new horn sound for the Wittenberger Kopf, but there is a mod available for a more accurate horn sound to the Wittenberger Kopf. A link in the description. What can be improved? The route, in my opinion, could be extended to Osterburken, bringing the route coverage up to 83 or 84 kilometers, plus the Verbindungsbahn to Schwabstrasse, which would make the route a lot better and more worthwhile, in my opinion. The BR103 from the Linke Rheinstrecke should also layer in for intercity services, as in 2000 they were on the way out, but they could still be seen on intercity trains at times, so the 103 should also be a substitution for the BR101 on intercity services. The N-Wagen Coaches should also have the first class variant, since it was done for the Mittenwaldbahn. Surely, TSG could have given the model over to DTG for them to reference the first class N-Wagen, now that it is in game. I mean, this is carried over from Bremen Oldenburg, where they didn't even model the first class. More time period accurate PIS displays, or at least a static object, like in the Niedertalbahn add-on. This would at least make things look a bit more time period accurate, although it would maybe come at the cost of passenger information being displayed. In conclusion, this route seems to me a bit of a mix between Bremen Oldenburg and Linke Rheinstrecke, and not fully accurate to the time period. The 140 and the Wittenberger Cab Car are a most welcome addition to the TSW fleet, and will do well if layered onto the Linke Rheinstrecke route. If you do get this route, I'd highly recommend you use the reskins to make the rolling stock look more time period accurate. Links to the skins I used are in the description. I would recommend waiting for a sale if you want to buy this add-on. Anyway, the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn review is delayed due to Lexi falling sick and not being able to record any footage until he recovers. So the next review, probably after my next train story, will either be the GWE remaster or the Semmringbahn. Any updates will be announced via community post. Until then, this is TB76 signing off. Goodbye.